Hi there, welcome to LSAT Demon Daily. I'm Josh Mansfield. I'm a teacher here with the Demon, and joining me is Rachel Ryan. Rachel is also a Demon team member, and Rachel's here to tell us a little bit about her success story of how she crushed the LSAT. Rachel, thanks so much for joining me today. It's going to be great.
Thanks, Josh, for having me. I'm really excited to share my story, and if it helps one student, great. I'm excited.
I'm sure it will. I know lots of students love these, and I think it's also a great opportunity to highlight some of our staff. I know that you are active on the Ask button. Lots of our students have probably gotten answers from you. You're also a tutor. Is that correct?
I'm not currently a tutor. I've been working a bit with Leslie on the admissions team,
It's on the
actually. So
admissions team.
starting to do some work with her, which I really enjoy that type of work. So
Awesome,
yeah.
awesome. Great. Well, I'm
hmm
sure students have been seeing you, and I know you've also been recording small I've seen you on our socials, and I
hmm
saw you walking around down New York. Felt like something out of a TV show a little bit.
Thanks. Well, I worked in TV for a long time, so
Oh, okay, that
maybe
fits.
check. At least I did that part right. Yeah, Braden told me that it was really hard to get the city audio out of that recording, so going forward, I'll record them in quieter places, but it did look cool.
It did. I thought it looked fantastic. Well, I want to
hmm
start then, maybe a little bit before we jump into the LSAT. You said you worked in TV for a long time.
I did.
What was the career prior to jumping into the LSAT?
Absolutely. So I have a bachelor's degree in fashion design and retailing, and I worked in fashion in New York for a few years and realized that it wasn't quite what I thought I wanted to do. So I sort of made the transition to costume design and worked for a long time in live entertainment, theater, cruise ships, theme parks, things like that, where you do entertainment installations. And then switched post pandemic. During the pandemic, obviously, all of that shut down. So that was really unfortunate. But I ended up pivoting into TV and working in the costume department on a lot of major TV shows, including, if there are any Power fans out there, I was on Raising Kanan for a long time. I worked on a little bit of one of the American Horror Story spin-offs. I was over on the Sex and the City spin-off for a little while. So got a lot of opportunities to meet a ton of great people and do some really interesting work on the costumes on those shows. So yeah.
Man, I didn't realize I was going to be meeting a celebrity today.
Dressing the celebrities. I
Dra-
like to be, this
that's
is
still
as in front of the camera as I will get.
all right, but
hmm
still, I mean, and that's a career that I would think that people who are interested in, theater production, as you said, fashion, those kind of elements, that has to be a dream career. And so I'm curious to know what prompted the switch over to wanting to go to law school.
Absolutely. It is a dream career. It has its faults as well. You know, it's 18-hour days sometimes. Um, Sometimes you don't know where you're going to be working until the night before. Like literally where you're going in New York, you won't know until you get the call sheet sometimes. So there are, the downsides too, as with any career. Um, but it is a dream career. I had so much fun. I got to travel the world, especially with the cruise ships. I was in New Zealand and Japan and all of these incredible places that as a 20 something year old I couldn't have afforded to go on my own. So it was really a great way to get to those places. Um, but law has always interested me. I'm going to age myself for a second and say that I started being interested in going to law school back in 2016, about a year after I graduated with my fashion degree. And the drive was always to help people. As much as I loved fashion, I even expressed to some of my undergraduate professors, where do I help people here? That's my passion. How do I get there with fashion? And actually, it was one of my professors who started talking to me about theater and sort of how you can help people by telling stories in theater and in film, and that those stories actually become so important. And I think during the pandemic, that was very apparent. We all turned to our TVs for comfort. And so I did feel like I was able to help people in that way. But the call to law was sort of always in the back of my mind. And back in 2023, I guess, I joined the Costume Designers Union in New York, IATSE, local USA 829 shout out. Unions are important, they're very important. And got really involved with the process of the union and negotiating our contracts and what that looks like and how we protect ourselves as freelance workers and how we protect workers in general. And it became a passion of mine. I ended up being on the team that went to Los Angeles last year to negotiate our union contract for our majors contract, which is the contract that all of the episodic television shows and a lot of the higher tier movies fall under, and went to LA and negotiated with the Alliance of Motion Pictures and Television Producers there and all of their attorneys who represent Universal, NBC, Fox, HBO, Paramount. So sitting in the room with them solidified it for me. I said, yes, I want to do this. I want to protect workers and do it in a way where I'm actually working for the workers. I've been the worker, I've done that, I've seen that side. I know what it is to freelance. I know how important and how difficult it can be to protect yourself. And obviously film sets and TV sets are so safe, and so because those protections are in place, they had to start from the bottom and get to a point where a TV set is, one of the safest places that you can be. There's always a medic and there's always just every resource you could
Mm-hmm.
need. There's free food and there's free coffee and there's everything like that. But that started somewhere. That started because workers said, hey, we're being exploited. It's not okay. You're profiting off of our labor and it's not okay. So I got really involved in that work, and it solidified my interest in becoming a labor and employment attorney. So I finally decided to just go for it. Um, I told a friend, I think I was home for Christmas hiatus because all the shows shut down for 2 weeks around the holidays. And I told a friend, I think I'm going to go to law school. And in January, I started studying for the LSAT. So once I decide that I'm going to do something, it gets started right away. And I kind of didn't look back. I was like, yep, I'm going to do this, and just started doing it. So yeah.
Awesome. Well,
hmm
I have to imagine. I worked before I'm going to law school. Um, I know that we have a lot of students who sometimes feel, well, I graduate in May. I've got to be ready to go in August. Or at worst, I take, a singular gap year. I do one gap year. I get my applications in. Whatever I do, maybe I'll go work at a law firm, but I just need to get to law school. Would you, not looking now, and maybe I'll have to ask you this again after law school, but starting right now, looking back, would you go back and try and go to law school right out of undergrad?
No,
What
I
are some of
wouldn't.
the reasons why that work has been valuable to you?
So many reasons. One, like I said, I got to travel the world. I
Mm-hmm.
met so many people. I got to work with so many different types of departments, especially in the type of work that I did. So I'm as comfortable talking to an attorney as I am to, the shop foreman who's building the wooden sets and like, hey, we need this. Um, I feel like I've just diversified the type of interactions that I'm able to have. Whereas in undergrad, you're mostly interacting with undergraduate students and obviously for your professors, but your professors are trained to interact with undergraduate students, and they're interacting with you in a way that, they've built that relationship as a professor. I think any kind of work, because any company that you go and work in, you're going to have those interactions where, like, maybe you need to talk to the finance department one day, and then the next day you need to talk to the janitor, and the next day you need to talk to the CEO. Maybe you end up really cultivating your relationships and making yourself the kind of professional person who can walk into any room and say, hi, I'm so and so, how are you? Nice to meet you. Let's talk about this. I think any kind of work will improve your confidence, and it just gives you great experience outside of school, and it gives you a little break from that, so that I think you probably, hopefully, I don't know, I haven't been in school for 10 years, but I'm hoping to go back to law school feeling refreshed, like, oh, exams are exciting. I haven't done that in a long time. Um, but I think it's really important to get out there and see a little bit of the world and do some work. And it's just going to make you a better law student. It's going to make you a better lawyer. And I think for me, one thing that I noticed when I was I went to a couple of accepted students visits, and the tour guides would say, oh, yeah, law school's a 9 to 5. You have to treat it like a 9 to 5. It's a big commitment. And I would see whether people had worked or had just come from undergrad, because the people who have worked are like, oh yeah, okay, cool, no problem, that sounds great. I mean, I worked 8 to 8 in TV, so
Right, right.
9 to 5 is excellent. um, and then you have the students that are 9 to 5. I've never done a 9 to 5. And I remember my first 9 to 5 and how exhausting it was. And I think to be able to do that as a test run with a job where you're new and people understand that you're new and they're going to be helpful and mentor you a little bit is going to set you up just for the mental stamina of a 9 to 5, because it does feel like a huge adjustment at first. It's very different than undergrad. And if you can get a year or two or 10 under your belt doing that before you go to law school, it's not going to harm you in any way. It can only help.
I've had a lot of people this summer. I'm also starting law school in the fall, and I've asked some questions like, okay, what can I do to make sure I hit the ground running? And a lot of people tell me, they say, oh, well, just enjoy your summer. And I'm like, I haven't had a summer enjoyment since I started working 5 years ago, right? Like
Right.
that's summer's just another part of your job. Give me something to
Hmm.
do.
Right.
So yeah,
Hmm.
I completely agree. I don't know anybody who has taken time off that would not even say they don't regret it, but wouldn't recommend it to people to go get some work experience and figure out what you want to do and kind of learn a little bit about that before you go into law school. It's
Absolutely.
yeah, yep. I think we add you to the list now. Uh, I guess we've probably been burying the lead a little bit. We should probably talk a little bit about your LSAT journey now.
Sure.
What was your diagnostic score? And you said you started in January. That was January of 2024. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So what was the diagnostic score?
Oh, it
Do you
was
remember?
a 152 with
Okay.
games, and I
With
never
games.
took an official with games. So,
Okay. Okay.
mhm.
Got it. So had the games, started studying in January. And what did your study journey look a little bit like?
It looked like I went to Barnes and Noble and bought the official LSAT book and closed it for about 2 weeks because I thought, wow, I can't do this. This is crazy. I'm just not, I don't know what I was thinking. Um, but then, like I said, once I had set my mind to it, I really wanted to do it. And I had an hour commute to work. It's funny, I was listening to, I think, Jack's episode this morning so that I could get your
Mm-hmm.
questions in my head. And he said he had a commute from Queens to Brooklyn, and I did the opposite commute every day from Brooklyn to Queens. So I know that commute, it's about an hour. And
And it's
I
great LSAT studying, apparently.
it's it's great, but I started before I even really started studying. I just searched LSAT podcast on Spotify and I found a couple, but the Demon stood out to me because I think the tagline "Don't pay for law school" was the cover, the thumbnail
Mm-hmm.
of the
Yep.
episode, and I was like, okay, well, that sounds great. So I'm like, let me listen to what these guys have to say. And instantly it just clicked. And I think I started studying as a live member in February after
Okay.
listening
So
to a couple episodes. Hmm.
quick turnaround to the Demon.
Yep.
Uh, when you started listening to the podcast, how does that messaging, you found it because it's the idea of go to law school for free,
Hmm.
which is quite the hook for people who don't realize that that's an option. But once you start listening to the material, how did that compare in terms of your feelings towards the LSAT as opposed to that official book that you had read prior to?
So the official book just obviously didn't help you study at all. It just was practice tests. And at first, I really thought that I could just study on my own and figure it out. And what I liked about LSAT Demon was how accessible they make the test. Um, we take away that scary feeling about it by saying, no, the LSAT's easy. Here's how. Just do it this way. And because I only ever officially studied with the Demon, I think I just took the advice. As a sieve, I was just absorbing everything that I could. And I never learned it the wrong way. So that helped a lot. I think just all of the advice that Ben and Nathan were giving on the podcast. And then obviously I was in live classes. Um, Reading comprehension felt, I love to read and I've always been a reader, but reading under a time crunch really stressed me out. And that was my worst section for a long time. And then I just started taking Chris's class every week, and the way that he broke the passages down just unlocked it for me. Um, and I actually always recommend his classes or the recordings of his classes to other students because I think he has such a great approach. And it just made the test seem accessible, like I said, and less scary and less daunting. I'm a first gen graduate student, so this felt kind of like a strange thing to go start doing, especially after leaving a career. And people ask me questions like what you asked me at the top, like, that sounds like a dream career. What are you doing? But this felt really important to me. And realizing that the LSAT was something that I could handle like a project and tackle in that way made it very intuitive.
You mentioned Chris's class. You know, in addition to the drilling practice tests, the classes as a live member, what did your study schedule typically look like?
It varied a lot because, like I said, I worked throughout the entire time. Um, I think I was maybe on PowerBook Raising Canaan for most of the time while I was studying. So my hours varied, but a lot of time it was like 8 to 7 ish. And so I would just study on the train on my way to work, study on the train on my way home. I was at Nathan's 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. class that he did twice a week. I don't know if he still does that time slot twice a week, but at the time he was, and I was there every single time because that was the best time slot for me to actually be in class. And then I studied a lot on the weekends, and I gave up a lot of weekends for studying because I had less time during the week. And of course, I tried to live my life and have fun and see my friends and travel and all of that. But if I was traveling, I was studying. If I was with my 2 year old nephew, I was studying. And it actually helped so much because all of those distractions help you to ignore the clock to get better at the test and get better at shutting the distractions out on test day so that when those little things go wrong, whether there's an issue with your proctor or if you're in a live test center like I was, they can get very loud.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to tune everything out and tell yourself, I know this, there's nothing that's going to stop me from knowing this. So let's just go, just do it. So I highly recommend studying with a toddler around if you can, if you have a toddler in your life, just do it. It's the best distraction that you can have. And if you can drill and get questions right with a toddler around, obviously with another adult watching them so that they're not alone, but it's very effective.
I had never even considered that. I was kind of the opposite. Like I had my wife and my kiddo and my dogs. Like they all went to her parents' house, and I like stayed at home by myself for a couple of days. I put like a sign on the door for like the UPS guy, like don't knock, don't ring the doorbell. But yeah, I never thought about the idea of just studying with the expectation that a testing center is not going to be a perfect situation. I
Hmm.
imagine. I mean, even commuting, like studying on a train, is going to
Oh yeah.
do that.
Yep.
Lots of people sitting
Absolutely.
around doing their own thing.
Hmm.
Yeah, I had never even thought about that as a benefit that would come from that. But that's a great point. Did you take it only in testing centers?
I did.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you recommend that? Obviously, you don't have the online to compare it to, but looking back, are you glad you did it in a testing center?
I was. It was good for me. It took a lot of the variables out. My dog took out like my dog barking. It took out the
Sure.
fact that I live in Brooklyn and had roommates. I think, the testing centers are there because not everyone has a place where they can shut a door and have all of the requirements met of nothing on the walls and you
Mm-hmm.
can't have this window. And the testing centers are there to help make the test more accessible if you don't have that option. So I can't compare it to the online version. I did all of my study online. Obviously, my practice scores were reflective of my real score. So either way, I think I would have been fine, but it just took a lot of the variables out for me, which really helped me to just focus in on the test day of, not thinking, oh, is my roommate going to come home and this is going to happen, or is my dog going to bark, or do I have a wall that's blank enough? Not really. It was a New York City apartment. I was using every square inch of space. So I think if you're worried about your home testing environment, the test center is a great option.
So you take the test then in August
Hmm.
as the first time. How did August go?
Very badly. Very,
Okay.
very badly. Not my score, but
Okay.
everything leading up to it. I was on vacation, so I went to a testing center that wasn't local to me. I realized I was going to be on this vacation during the testing week, so I looked
Okay.
up what testing centers were available there and went there. So I was already out of my element, right? And did not sleep the night before, was so anxious, was so sure that I was going to sleep through or something was going to go wrong. So everything that I just said about taking the variables out didn't work for me on the first one because my nerves just truly just got to me. And I think that's part of why we have the option to take the test a few times because your nerves can just get to you on that first attempt. So I went in, I think I had an 8 a.m. slot, which was not great either. I kind of prefer because I always studied in the afternoon and into the late evening, and I preferred to wake up and have my coffee and do
Sure.
something else with my day before I jump into the LSAT. So it's a really early time slot. I was running on no sleep. I was extremely nervous, felt nauseous because I had no sleep and I was nervous. And then went into the testing center and opened the test. And it was just the exact same test that I had always done and had always studied. Opened it up and thought, oh, this is easy. I can do this. But the damage had sort of already been done with the nerves and the sleeplessness. So I scored a little below my range. It was a good score. It was a 166. At the time, I was testing 172 to 179. So it was lower than what I wanted, but it was a good score. So I felt pretty good about starting with that, given all of the factors that sort of set me up to not do well. But I knew I wanted to take it again. And I already had September and October on my calendar ready to go. I think at that point I was already registered for September because of the registration deadlines. So I knew I was coming back. So that wasn't a problem.
I think you point something out that's really useful, and it's a different attitude. I think the mistake that we see students make. So many students like the idea of taking a test, right? Oh, I want to do one and see what it's like. I want to get it out of the way. And I think your story highlights there is some value in doing that, right? There's some value in going and taking a test because you're probably are going. You might be nervous. You might have a hard time sleeping, and it might be nice just to sit down and do it. But you should only do that when your test scores reflect your range because you get to see because if the worst of the worst happens, which for you it sounds like it basically did. It doesn't sound like anything else around the test could have gotten any worse. And you still score 166, like that's your floor. Not only is that the floor, like that's the basement floor. That is as low as it's going to go. And that would be so encouraging. If you're taking a test though, wanting to score a 170, for example, and your practice test range are in the low 160s, and then you hit your floor in the 150s, the gap between your goal score and what you did in August is going to feel daunting.
Hmm.
Absolutely daunting. That's
Absolutely.
yeah, that's a great story that illustrates that, I think. Okay, so then you go to September.
Hmm.
And how did
Yep.
September go?
September, everything just felt right in September. I think I had a 1 p.m. start and I took it on a Saturday, so I had the day off. Got up, worked out, did maybe one or two drilling questions, but really didn't want to touch the LSAT much.
Mm-hmm.
Ate breakfast, walked my dog, just kind of did everything that I would normally do on a Saturday and didn't think about the LSAT, and then just got on the subway and went to the testing center. And I had a playlist for my trip because, again, it was like an hour to get there. It's pretty much
Uh-huh.
an hour to get anywhere in New York, truly. Um, I had a playlist that I set up and listened to on my way, and it was all songs that make me feel like a badass. If I can say that on here. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, I can. Yeah.
absolutely.
I'm at LSAT Demon. I can
Yeah, I
say
say
that.
you've listened to Thinking LSAT. Trust me, you're fine.
um, so, and for me, I'm someone that your mental state affects your performance a lot, whether it's a workout. I definitely have a better workout when I have good music on. And it really helped me with the LSAT too. I sort of equated it to I was a really big swimmer in high school, before high school and in high school. I was a varsity swimmer. And before every race, I had a song that I would listen to. And I would play that song in my head while I was swimming because we didn't have, maybe now they have headphones that work for while you're swimming and doing that workout. But at the time, we did not. So if you wanted to hear music while you were working out during swim practice, or especially during a meet, you needed to have that music in your brain. So that really set me up in that way. I sort of used that for the LSAT. Not that I was singing while I was taking the test, but I sort of had the mentality baked in and went into the test with confidence because of that. So if you're someone that gets really hyped up by music, I highly recommend playing a couple of your favorite songs that make you feel good while you're either waiting for the test to start or on your way to the test center. It really worked for me.
I want to know what the title of that playlist was, if you can remember it.
I don't know if it had a title. I can tell you that the number one most played song on it was Wait For It from the Hamilton soundtrack because I
Okay.
am a theater nerd
Right,
and
you
that song
theater,
just
yes.
really gets me. So it was
Okay,
that.
all right. That works in place of a title. I'm good with
hmm
that. uh awesome. So, and what did you score in September?
174.
174. So 152 to 174.
Yep.
At that point, you had your goal score or a score that you were happy with. Did you then
I
choose to take it in October?
I had my goal score.
That was the
I
goal score. Okay.
It was my goal score from the very beginning. It was the number that when I put that number in the estimator, it said full ride to all of the schools that I wanted to go to, I wanted to apply to.
Mm-hmm.
And that became, I know you're not supposed to have a specific number. I did. Oops. Um, you can't help how your brain works, you know? So I couldn't get that number out of my head. And I was seeing it on practice tests. I was seeing higher than it on practice tests. So I was okay with that goal. And I remember getting the email and I was at work and I sat at my desk and I closed my eyes for about 30 seconds and I visualized the number and then I opened it and it was the same. And it just, obviously, the visualization did nothing. The work had already been done, the score was already there, but it felt really good.
I'm sure it
Yes.
did. I'm sure it did.
hmm
Before we talk a little bit about law school and kind of that application process, I want to know, when studying, what is the number one piece of advice on in studying that you felt like helped you the most that you would want other students to get?
So I'm gonna say two. Maybe I'm jumping the gun, but I'm gonna say
Okay.
the piece that was the best for me, and then the piece that I now try to give students the
Okay,
most.
great. Yeah.
So the piece that was the best for me was don't pay for law school. It drove everything that I did. Like I said, it brought me to the podcast, and it made me realize that I could actually do this. And every time that I was getting home from work at 9 p.m. and exhausted or feeling like this is too much of an effort. I don't know if I can do this. That was what kept me going because the idea that you can unlock this opportunity for yourself with one test score is pretty incredible. And the test becomes, in that way, an opportunity. And that was how I tried to approach it. We get to take this test so that we can present our best selves to these schools so that they can ask us to come to them. And it just became sort of my tagline in my own head while I was studying as well. I know it's our tagline here at the Demon, but it really helped me a lot. And then the piece of advice that find myself giving to a lot of students because it was something that I struggled with myself is to just trust yourself and to sort of put the imposter syndrome aside. We all struggle with it at one point or another. And as the test gets easier, as you begin to understand it more, that is sometimes actually when you start to second guess yourself because you're thinking, this is too easy. This can't be right. That can't be the answer. It's just way too easy. And it almost always is the correct answer, is that answer that seems too easy or too obvious. And what I find is that when students start choosing the wrong answers, it's because they didn't trust that they understood the question. And I think it's really important to just believe in yourself and know that you do understand it and that you are getting better at it, even on days when your dashboard's not reflecting that. You're absorbing information. When you work out, sometimes you have a better workout day than another, and that doesn't mean that you're not progressing. It just means that progress isn't a straight line. So,
Love it. Love the advice. You get your score in September. You then
mhm,
applied to law schools. Do you know where you're going to law school?
I do. I am going to Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. It's going to be a big change from New York.
A little
Um,
bit, yeah. I could see that.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I went down there for Admitted Students Day thinking that there was absolutely no way that I was going there, and I was on the plane back home wearing a Wake Forest baseball cap. So, yeah, made a pretty quick decision. I just fell
Pretty
in love
quick.
with it. Mm-hmm. So,
And I assume, given what your motto was, that you're not going to be paying for law school.
I am paying a little bit for law school, but I will graduate debt free. So
Congratulations.
I
The right
set
price
myself
is what
up for
you're.
the right price. Yes, it
Love
was a
it.
tough admission cycle too,
Yep.
and I did get some full rides that I ended up declining just because they weren't quite the right fit. Where Wake Forest really felt like the right rank and the right fit for me for the price that I was going to pay. So,
And I think that's a great highlight too. We say don't pay for law school. By that we mean pay the right price. Pay the
yeah,
right price so that you can get the job that you want in the city that you want in the practice area that you want for as little as you can. And so that's, there are a lot of decisions that go into that. And it sounds like you've got a great fit. Well, Rachel, I think that's everything I've got. So thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time. It's always so much fun to get to hear some of these success stories, and especially from another Demon team member. So thanks a bunch and for coming on and telling your story.
awesome. Thank you, Josh. It was a lot of fun, and I appreciated sort of going back down memory lane and thinking about that process again because I think sometimes, um, as teachers, ask button responders, we feel a little detached from that, and it's nice to remind ourselves that we were exactly where our students were, and some of our students will be here telling their
Yes.
success stories, so it's very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you want to tell your success story or have any questions for us, please email daily at lsatdemon.com. Thanks for listening.